The issue is not the parenting approach, because I don't think there's a parenting approach that supports dysregulation. Like, that wouldn't do well, that wouldn't sell. Okay. The issue is the breakdown in the application. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my podcast. How are you all? This week, I want to take a little bit of a pivot and get into the center of our relationships and that which is informing our relationships, which is our early attachments. And really what I want to talk about specifically is parenting. Now, you don't have to be a parent to heavily relate here, because you had a parent or you were raised by somebody, you want to be a parent, or you just witness other parents and the way that they raise their kids. And we are really all indirectly or pretty directly actually affected by this, because I would say that society is shaped by how we raise our kids. So people really do have very strong opinions about this. Now, what got me all fired up to do this episode is this conversation, this pretty polarized conversation that I'm witnessing around specifically gentle parenting. So I just want to use that to talk about some of these concepts. And I'm not here to say like this is how you should parent, this is how you shouldn't, but I really do want to talk about it from a research-based perspective and the neuroscience side of it, and how it really is very much in alignment with the type of work that I do with the subconscious, because the work that you're doing in the subconscious is essentially undoing harmful belief systems, ideas, patterns, and laying down new pathways, removing neural pathways that just don't help you, that are leading you to dead ends over and over again and causing you pain in your life. So that's what I work with. I work with the subconscious, and the majority of this stuff all goes back to those early first 10 years of your life, 5 to 7 years of your life, that early conditioning. And so I just want to talk a little bit about it from that perspective. So I made a post on TikTok and I happened to mention gentle parenting. It was just sort of like a sidebar part of the conversation, but people really latched onto it. And that was what generated the most engagement. And people were either all for it or they thought it was the worst thing in the world. And then I remember seeing on social media this grandmother that was being interviewed by her daughter. And she said, "What do you think of gentle parenting, Mom?" And her grandma like just about busted a seam. Like her eyes were popping out of her head and she was like so mad about it. And she felt like it was a reason for this entitled, disrespectful generation that she feels she's witnessing, and that parents who were doing this are doing a disservice to their children and everybody around them. And she hit her kids and her kids turned out perfectly great. And I was like, okay, got it. She was pretty like triggered by that. Now, there's two sides of this conversation. Like, yeah, if that's what gentle parenting is doing, if it's raising disrespectful, entitled youth, then yeah, that's not good. Like, who would be for that? That's not great. And then there's the other piece that's like, okay, yes, nobody's arguing that your kids are great and they turned out great, but I don't think it's because you hit them. There's a large body of research and evidence on that, like at least 60 years of it, that confirms that there's absolutely zero, and I mean zero, benefit to the kid. Corporal punishment doesn't actually achieve anything good in the long term. It's short-term gain for the parents for the most part, due to a lack of tools otherwise. And, we can talk a little bit about that in a minute, but I just thought to myself, okay, like there's an oversight here. The issue is not the parenting approach, because I don't think there's a parenting approach that like supports dysregulation. Like, that wouldn't do well, that wouldn't sell. Okay. The issue is the breakdown in the application. So the people that swear by it are most likely, they've actually researched it, they've done it, and they're putting it into practice. Now, these approaches, by the way, like any connective-based approach, it's not easy. Like, you have to do your own work. You usually need support in it, because you have to show up for your kid and hold a boundary where it's hard and your own stuff is getting triggered. and then to react in a nonviolent way when you might feel that you're really being triggered. And I think the reason why a lot of parents, and I'm going to break down what gentle parenting even is in just a moment, because I don't think a lot of people actually know. They hear the term, they see poor representation, and then they go, oh, that's terrible. Okay, which I get. But let's look a little deeper, because I think a lot of people don't do their research. They just hear something and take it at face value. They hear it on the news. They hear it on social media. I mean, there's all the time I hear people saying shit like about this study or that study, and then the study doesn't even exist sometimes, if you actually do your research. And then you've got everybody parroting it. So let's just get into the structure of what it even is, okay? Gentle Parenting is a book that Sarah Ockwell Smith wrote in 2019, which is very recent. Like, I actually had, when I was really needing to outsource and get more support for myself, when like things were batshit bananas and people were hanging from the chandeliers and throwing things, and it was crazy when I had like all my kids, because I had 5 and 7.5 years, and then I had my 6th baby 3 years later. So in 10 years, I had my 6 kids. And there was a period of real intensity where I was very deeply triggered and I really needed support, and how to like properly parent in a way that was not harmful and also have it be effective, because like certain things weren't working and I wasn't feeling good about it, and my kids weren't feeling good about it. So I had to really outsource. And the approaches that really resonated with me were approaches that I've talked about before, like Patty Whiffler's hand-in-hand parenting. I really took a deep dive into, and I worked with her personally. She was amazing and so helpful and helping me understand certain things and putting her approach into practice. And it was very connection based. I love Dr. Becky of Good Inside. I still listen to her. I just think that she's so real and raw and like heart-centered. And that's, for me, that's what resonates. Anything that goes to root cause and brings you back to yourself is what lights me up, because that's where it's at. The more punitive and like surface approaches and behavioral approaches don't really inspire me at all. So she wrote this book in 2018. And when I started hearing all this conversation, I'm like, oh, I have to look a little deeper into this. So I started researching her and the book, and I was like, oh, this just sounds like something repackaged. This is not new, this approach. And she even self-admittedly says, I didn't make this up. She basically says, I repackaged authoritative parenting. She didn't say she was creating a philosophy or an approach. Like, she never said that. Somebody else ran with that. But it did resonate with a lot of people, because I think a lot of people are wanting to show up, parent differently, break cycles, and do things in a more connective way that's more enjoyable and enriching for themselves and their kids. So Sarah Ockwell basically says this is authoritative parenting repackaged. And the reason why she changed it to gentle parenting for her book was because it sounded too much like, and I'm sure you'll agree, with authoritarian parenting. And authoritarian parenting is what you think of when you think of, corporal punishment, more punitive, consequence, my way or the highway, go pick your switch, you better mind. And these approaches really are not empowering, and the child loses agency. And the data is really in on that. I mean, this in the long term does not benefit the child or the parent-child dynamic. But authoritative parenting is centered in empathy, understanding, respect, and firm boundaries that are age-appropriate, okay? Boundaries, by the way, the thing that people are criticizing the lack of. So if there's no boundaries in place, the child is usually dysregulated, because boundaries are necessary for security for a kid, because it just creates too much of a disconnect, and they sort of float out into the ether, and there's nothing keeping them grounded and tethered to themselves, because they're really relying on their parent to inform them of that. Okay, I'm going to go into that explanation in just a little bit, but this is what I see a lot of parents having a hard time showing up. When I see kids that are really behaviorally off track, it's usually because of a lack of clear, loving, and connective boundaries. Also really witnessed parents struggle with this. They don't know how to have the boundary. Sometimes it wasn't modeled, but oftentimes what I see a lot is that Parents are afraid of their children's big feelings. And if they haven't learned how to process their own feelings around that and those unresolved energies in their own body, then they don't actually know how to hold space when they're confronted with their children's big feelings. And it's easier to just ignore it and think that they're fixing it. But really, it's just continuing to support this disconnect, which is in fact the thing that's contributing to the kids' off-track behavior. And this is why if parents have brought their kids to me, more often than not, I recommend that the parent does the work first, because when they change, especially if their kid's younger, everything else will change. And the parents are really informing their children by what they're modeling. So I hope I've made that clear. So gentle parenting, aka authoritative parenting or connection-based approaches, are not permissive. They require a lot of you. They really require you to move in, meet your kid, support them, have the boundary, have the limits so that they can get regulated. So then the bad behavior goes away. The bad behavior is a result of a dysregulated child, which is a result of a disconnection. And it can happen very easy for a kid. So yeah, the breakdown really and the judgment is on the lack of application, I believe. That's from my perspective and from what I understand about it, what's going on here. So I want to talk a little bit about children and their early development and the amazing ways that their mind works. So when kids, the first 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, even years of their life, they're essentially in a state like hypnosis. They are in that natural state of mind that you're intentionally accessing when you do hypnosis to target a negative belief or something and then to create the positive change. So this is pretty amazing. And this is why hypnosis yields the quickest results. This is why, by the way, the majority of our conditioning and our belief systems are firmly in place in the first 7 years of our life, because we are highly, highly suggestible. All of our experiences and our early attachments are informing us of who we are. And interestingly, our critical thinking is not established yet. And our critical factor is not in place. Now, if you want an explanation, a deeper explanation of some of the things that I'm talking about, I have a video called Hypnosis Demystified. It's really great if anybody just wants to know more about what hypnosis is, if they're considering doing it. I'll drop the link below. It's free, and I'll send that to your inbox if you want that. But I break this stuff down a little bit further. I explain the vertical model of the mind, and I demystify hypnosis a little bit and help you really just get clarity around it. But our critical factor is like this filter. And as we get older, it helps us sort of match up what's on the outside versus what's on the inside, and like what aligns, what are we going to accept, what's truthful for us or what's not. And it's all based off of our conditioning and our belief systems and our values, right? So children, that critical factor is not in place. And I did not know this until I became a hypnotist, but I think this is fascinating. Children borrow their caregivers' critical factor until they develop their own. So they're constantly looking to them to be informed of like what's safe, what's good, how they feel about themselves, their worth, all of it, right? So everything is a message and it's informing the child. So how we show up, how we attune, like it all really carries a lot of weight. And this can feel a little overwhelming, actually, if you think about it, but it also opens up amazing possibility to understand and know that when you show up and you really see your kid and you really do your best to attune and hear them and support them and see them in their best light, speak to the truth of who you know they are at their center, even when they're off track, which is what Dr. Becky's whole approach is. What I love about it is it's recognizing and remembering that your child, no matter what it looks like, they are good inside. Seeing them in the light of the truth of who they are, becoming their cheerleader. I've witnessed this really help pull kids through when they've been struggling, even as teenagers, like really helping them remember by reflecting back to them that truth, instead of like a lot of parents sometimes get really afraid and really triggered and then controlling, and then they become disappointed. Their child will reflect back the disappointment that their parent is seeing in them. And they're not understanding it. Most likely the parent is just afraid, but the kid does not perceive it that way. The kid really sees, I'm a disappointment. And also, by the way, we lack the tools when we're really little. We don't understand yet how to process the information because we have to be taught how to process the information. So the information's coming in, and that's why oftentimes kids take on meanings. We've all done it. We've attached incorrect meanings to events in our life, and we believe them for the rest of our life, and maybe they determine or until we work them out and realize that it's just a negative belief. It doesn't mean the event didn't happen. It doesn't mean it wasn't traumatizing for the child, but the meaning that they assigned to it was incorrect because, of course, it does not determine the child's value and the child's worth. And so this is the kind of stuff as an adult, when you intentionally utilize this modality and work with the subconscious, you can go in and target those beliefs and really make big shift happen very quickly there. Which is what I'm always going on about, how great hypnosis is in the subconscious work, because it's very powerful. So just to touch on the benefits of connection-based approaches and co-regulation, it fosters resilience, secure attachments. So think big picture, think like mother-in-law stuff, like who is your kid choosing as their partner, because the attachments, their early attachments are going to be informing their later choices in life and their relationships. Improving emotional regulation, healthy stress response, fostering independence, reducing behavioral issues. The list can go on and on. So I do want to touch on the documented harms of corporal punishment and more punitive approaches, because I just think it's worth pointing out. I had the privilege of overhearing a very lively debate of some very intelligent teenagers, and they were having a very respectful debate, and they were arguing over if corporal punishment is good or not, which is interesting, right? Like, you would think they'd all be against it. But interestingly, out of the 6 kids, 2 of them were opposed to it, and they were for gentle parenting and more connective-based approaches, and the other 4 were adamantly in favor of it because they had been spanked and hit as children, and they really stood by what their parents did, and they believe it helped them, and that is how they intended on parenting their children. This is not uncommon. I've heard a lot of people say, well, this is just how my parents did it, so I'm just going to do it the same way, okay? But there is a substantial body of research around corporal punishment, and it's basically been shown and proven to be of no benefit. The only benefit is in short-term compliance. So major medical and psychological organizations such as American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Psychological Association have issued policy statements recommending against it due to its overwhelming evidence of its harmful effects. And the research has really found it to consistently be associated with harmful mental health and physical health consequences, like increased aggression, behavioral issues, increased risk of depression and anxiety, lowered self-esteem, impaired parent-child bond and attachment, less moral internalization, which is interesting. This is basically where you have fear-based compliance. So children are not obeying out of their genuine values. They're obeying because of fear of punishment. And so this is decreased, right? And so when you have higher moral internalization, you're going to have your external moral rules, values, and standards become a part of your belief system and your personality. And that's like your inner compass and guides your choices from within. Neurologically, gray matter is reduced, impaired cognitive development, and poor academic performance can be a result of this. I mean, if a child grows up in an unsafe environment, it can make it very difficult to have any time to focus on learning. You need to be in a pretty relaxed state to be able to absorb information, to be creative, to learn. If a child's dysregulated and their security is threatened, then they are going to be generally scanning for threats. So I don't say any of that, obviously, from a place of judgment. That's just what the evidence and the research shows. So basically, bottom line is connection-based parenting is nice. Yes, it's nice. It's gentle. I'd say ultimately it's more work for the parent in the short term anyways, with some big long-term gain. But it's also, it aligns with the neuroscience, with psychology, and just like spiritual values and all of that working together, which is what we are. We're mind, we're body, we're soul. And so we really do have to consider the whole piece. So just to close, I really just invite you to reflect on your own experiences and your own conditioning and how you can start to, just through observing and witnessing, how you can show up for yourself differently, because ultimately we get to become our own parent. We get to reparent ourselves, which sometimes people think of that as like an overwhelming, exhausting thing, but only because it needs a reframe. Like, what if reparenting yourself looked easy? What if it looked like just showing up and allowing, and there was no control? And what if it just looked like just being present with yourself? So there it is. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you in a couple weeks. Mwah! So long. Thank you for tuning in to the May Be Mindful podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us grow and improve. For more information, resources, and exclusive content, visit our website at maybemindful.com or go ahead and follow us over on Instagram at maybemindful. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please give me a follow, screenshot the episode, and go ahead and tag me until next week when I bring you another thought-provoking and inspiring topic. Until then,